Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is Tom Bukovac. He's going to share some stories about playing guitar with Billy Gibbons.
Man, I'll tell you, Billy Gibbons, man, first of all, one of the most sweetheart guys I've ever met. Just a lovely cat, just beautiful dude, such a kind soul. First time I met him was on probably one of those I used to do every one of those Don Was gigs when Don's always hired to do tributes for people. Anytime like somebody's got some sort of event where they need to put on a tribute show, they always call Don and put together a band. It's usually, for years, it was Ken Aronoff, and usually me and Aldi Freed would go do those gigs, you know. And then I stopped working with Don for a while. Then he just recently called me for another gig. I was like surprised to hear from him. It was really cool to hear because I was wondering what he was doing. But it was one of those gigs, you know, where like Billy came up and sat in on a few tunes, and I remember being immediately taken at how cool he was to work with, you know, like very soft-spoken and sweet. And he would like turn around and say, okay guys, here's what I'm gonna do, and if you come in, you just do this. And we were like, cool man, let's do it, Billy. And then he would throw solos around. He was very cool about, you know, letting other people play and stuff. There's a video on YouTube from years ago of me playing one of those Don Was gigs where we were playing LaGrange, and he throws solos around to everybody, and I'd fucking jump in there and play one, you know, and then, you know, he's been doing some of those Jimmy Irsay gigs, so Jimmy will hire him to come out and play, and it's always great. I just love the way Billy conducts himself. He's like great at efficiently working at a sound check. He doesn't waste time. He just gets taken care of, you know. He's like total pro. Comes in, okay guys, let's do Thunderbird, and at the end I'm gonna do these stabs. I'm gonna, you know, be your cue for the ending. You know, it's like, okay man, we got you. And so he's really good friends with one of my best pals, with Guthrie Trapp, you know. So I'm always hearing Guthrie telling stories about how fun it is hanging out with Billy, you know. And then I heard they had just moved here to Nashville, you know, in the Green Hills area, and the other day I went into Glazer Instruments to pick up some guitars that had got fixed, and he was there, and it was kind of late. The store was about to close. It was getting dark, and I had my two boys with me, and man, I was like, Billy, how you doing, man? And he's like, oh, great, these are your boys. And he said, what are your names? Marshall, Leo? And he pulled out, he had it in his vest pocket, man. He had these really cool, like, pieces of paper that said Billy Gibbons, and he's like autographed them and, you know, drew a little something cool on each one and handed them to the boys. He was prepared, you know. And then I went and started talking to some of the other cats in the shop about some stuff, and he sat with my boys for like 45 minutes and just sat and talked to them. And they were like, they love ZZ Top. My kids are like really schooled on classic rock, but they didn't quite realize what was happening until I got them in the car later and said, boys, you just sat with Billy Gibbons for 45 minutes. And they were like, yeah, he was cool. He's a great dude, man. Just an ace of a guy, man. I just love how colorful and personality he is. And he's he's got such a brand, you know. He's got this whole shtick that's just so entertaining, you know. Just cool, man. The definition of cool. Right.
Is there a ZZ Top record that you go for? Like
oh yeah, Tejas, man. Yeah, that's always my favorite. That one, that Arrested for Driving While Blind, and It's Only Love. I love those tracks. They made a lot of great records, but man, I will also, I'm not talking shit because it wasn't their fault, but I will also cite them as having the worst remixes of anybody. I mean, they took all those great songs. Remember what was in the 2000s, and they had somebody remix and put a bunch of reverb on everything. You remember that? Like, why would you do that? That's what made those records so cool. Was like the dry drums, and like on Tejas, the drums are so dry. They're like, they sound like they were recorded in a carpet phone booth. You know, they're like, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And then they took LaGrange and they put like this big gated verb on the snare and stuff. It's like, why did they do that? I mean, it's whatever. We still have the originals, right? And it'll always be great. But man, they had been kicking ass for what? Fucking 50 years too. They've been killing it, right? We did a couple shows with Billy with Aunt Wilson this summer, and we were out, it was us and Jeff Beck and Billy, and that was really cool. I got to meet Jeff, not for more than a few minutes, but just to be able to sit and watch him sound check and play, get a real close look at his rig and stuff. It was really cool. But yeah, Billy, we've got a gig coming up with him real soon. He's coming out and doing another one of those Earth Day gigs. I'm really excited to see him. It's always super fun to play with him. He's great, man. Yeah, great to see her too. I was playing with Vince Gill, touring with him, right? My old buddy Joe Vitale called me, who's been Joe's drummer for 50 years. They've been best friends since 1968, those two guys, right? So I've known Joe Vitale for probably 20 years, no, probably more than that, 25 years. When I first moved to Nashville, he started calling me for sessions. I would go stay at his house and record with him. And he's a great musician, plays great piano and flute. He produced all those Walsh records, wrote a lot of songs with Joe. He wrote like Rocky Mountain Way, and he wrote Pretty Maids All in a Row and shit, from the Hotel California record. And so Joe and I, Vitale, were friends for a long time. And I remember him texting me, said, "Buko, call me. I got some work for you." I remember him saying that, and I was like, "Oh, geez, I wonder if it's a session or something, And it turned out, he goes, "Man, Waddy, Wachtel, who'd been playing guitar on that previous year Joe Walsh tour, had to do Stevie Nicks because I think that was like a conflict of interest there. Like, Waddy's always been Stevie's guy, right? So he couldn't do both gigs, and also he had to choose which one he wanted to do, so he had to pick the Stevie Nicks gig. They needed a rhythm guy, so I had never met Walsh before. I knew so much about him because he was really, like, being from Cleveland myself, he was you're the only guy that ever made it out of Cleveland, you know what I mean? So my whole childhood, all I ever heard about was Joe Walsh. So he was like a mythical figure to me growing up, And I was really happy when I first met Joe Vitale to hear all the Walsh stories, because he's got the greatest stories, you can imagine. So I was like, gee, man, well, I'm kind of committed to the Vince Gill tour next year, but I would sure like to try this, because he's a childhood sort of hero and big influence on the way I played, right? I called Vince, and I was just sort of like, hey, man, I was sort of, didn't want to really come out and say it, He's like, "Joe Walsh called you to play?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "You got to go do that, man." He was super cool about it. Vince is the coolest. Super understanding about that. So I went out I think one of the first moments was I flew out to LA to sort of sit with Joe and Waddy in Joe's old house that he used to live in LA, where he had all his dark days. He doesn't live in that house anymore, but he still owns the house. So that's the first time I met Joe Walsh. So we were all in that house together, just, those two fucking knuckleheads and me, and we're all just like, here's what I was playing on Rocky Mountain Way, and just sitting in a circle with these crappy little practice amps, Here's what I was playing on this and this, and I just sat with them, and, it was great. And it's like one of those moments where you kind of pinch yourself going, wow, man, this is pretty surreal, I just sort of slipped into that gig. I remember the first time I played with them was at the House of Blues in Vegas. And the first thing I noticed, I've played a lot of gigs in my life with lots of people. I've been an eternal sideman, backed up so many singers of all styles of music. And the first thing I noticed about Joe in that gig was I've never seen people in the crowd so violently with somebody. The first couple of chords, the first song, I was like, oh my God, look at these people. They feel like they know him. They're so behind him. Like that sort of ordinary average guy image that he sold, I'm just one of you guys, I'm just an ordinary guy. They buy into that, whether it's real or not, man, and they they just feel like they know him, man. Love you, Joe. You know, and I just was like, wow, I've never seen. It's like, you know, some football teams have like really fucking violent fans that just live and die with that team. That's how his fans are. And Vince himself, first thing he said, he goes, have you ever seen anybody who has that kind of power over a crowd? He's like, he noticed it too. He was like, the way that Joe's fans are just so with him, man. It's like amazing. And man, you could be on fire up on there on that stage and nobody would even notice you're there. They're looking at him, man. You know what I mean? It's amazing. And he just has a way of really connecting with people, you know. And Joe is a gear addict. He's got lockers full of gear all over LA, like and some of them he hasn't been in years, man. You know, he's just a hoarder, you know. Thousands of guitars and stuff that he owns, and I've been told that he has entire Moog modular systems and, you know, everything, millions of amps and things. You know, he loves buying gear, but it's not just old gear. He likes new gear too. He's not a purist as far as it has to be old. You know, I'm like that, but he's not. He'll play a damn brand new $300 Ibanez on a gig. Like he doesn't care. He'll play a Squire. He'll play a brand new run-of-the-mill Les Paul, some $500 Stratocaster. He doesn't care. And I always noticed that even though he owns tons of killer old guitars, he never brings them on the road. He won't bring them out. I do. I like to bring all my cool old shit on the road. I like to play it, you know. But he's like, I'm not bringing that on the road, you know. He doesn't, you know, you'd think that he wouldn't care. Even Vince Gill, you know, when I play with him, he brings all his cool old shit out, you know. As long as you take care of it, it's going to be okay. But Joe won't bring any of his old stuff out, which I always thought was kind of odd, you know. Because he was always sort of known as like a poster boy for vintage guitars to begin with, you know. I remember when we got done rehearsing that one day at this place in L.A., I said, I know you'd been through a lot of guitars, you know, is there any that you lost or you got rid of that you really wish you had back? And he said, oh yeah, man, it's the blue telly with the stars on it. I'm like, what? He doesn't really remember a lot of things, you know, like things get very foggy. But he said, yeah, I've been looking for it forever. I go, what was it? And he says, a blue telly, it had stars on it. Do you remember like what year? He goes, I think it was like a 64, 65. And that's what I played on Funk 49. And I was like, really? I thought, you know, I'd always hear rumors that it was a Strat or whatever, but he insisted that it was a blue telly. He couldn't really remember any details except that it had stars on it. And I'm assuming it must have been a rosewood board transition logo, 64, 65, if in fact that's what it was. Maybe I'll talk about it on my channel. Maybe somebody out there knows of an old telly that has stars. I go, how big were the stars? And he said, about that big. You know. The story changes every time you ask him something. It's very foggy. But then Vitali came walking over, and he's like, what are you guys talking about? And I said, well, Joe was just saying that he really wishes he could find that blue telly with the stars on it that he played on Funk 49. And Vitali goes, that was a Strat. And he was like, he was there, you know. So it's all very foggy. And I wonder if there is some mythical blue telly with stars on it that's out there that really he really did play on Funk 49, you know. When I got that gig, I was very studious about doing my homework. I wanted to be very prepared for that gig. I studied probably more than I needed to. I've always loved those records, so they were already in there. And then I studied them even further, right? Even though I already knew the tunes, I really, really studied. And then I studied all the live versions, and then I studied the board tapes of the recent tour that they sent me, you know, with Waddy playing. And see, Waddy's like a gunslinger, you know, amazing guitar player, but he's not real worried about playing the like original parts, you know. He does his own thing, and it's amazing, right? There'd be times when he'd be like soloing over Joe's solos and stuff, and I'm like, you know, as a session player, I am programmed to not solo over someone else's solo. When someone's like Joe Walsh is playing a solo, I'm playing rhythm, right? And I'm going to try to make a nice bed for him to solo over. That's what I do. I guess it came across like I was playing more timidly than Waddy because I was playing more rhythm. You know, I'm not a gunslinger like Waddy. You know, Waddy's a real gunslinger, and I appreciate that. I'm a rhythm guy. I can gunsling if I need to, and if I have to, and I will when it's called for. But my natural inclination is to play nice rhythm. You know, play the parts. So that's what I was doing, and I think like, you know, I remember I had a couple comments early on, like, you got to play out more. You got to play out more. You know, you got to, come on, Buko, play out more. And I kept thinking, like, what do you mean play out more? I'm playing the fucking parts that are on the record. He's playing the lead. I'm playing the rhythm. You know, that's what it's supposed to be. And I remember about a month or two into the tour, you know, I didn't think it was going very well. Like, I didn't think Joe liked me very much. And, you know, he never said anything, but I just didn't get the vibe like it was all really working out that great. And then he wanted to work up a new tune. So he said, come into my dressing room the next day, and I want to show you what I'm playing. He wanted to do Confessor, right? Remember that track? Great song. And so sure enough, next day at the sound check, the tour manager comes over. Joe wants to see you in his dressing room. So I go in there, you know, in this giant dressing room, and Joe's like, you know, mowing down some catering in there, and I walk in, and he comes over and he gives this big hug, man. He's like, man, I just want to tell you, you're coming on real strong. And I was like, thanks, man. I feel like I came in with the wrong attitude. Maybe I came in, you know, knowing the record too much, you know. And he's like, nah, man, you came in just right. It's a learning curve. I'll never forget him saying that. And then he goes, you know, he showed me this bit he's playing on the Confessor with this real raunchy little practice amp, you know, all distorted, and I'm just like, he goes, you got it? Yeah, man, I think I got it, man. And so we're just about to wrap it up, and I said to him, I go, hey, man, can I ask you a question, man? He's like, yeah, what do you want to know? I said, because we had been through these long days of rehearsals where they were bringing in pallets full of amps for him to try, 2 at a time, bringing them in like song after song. And every amp he plugged into sounded exactly the same. It just sounds like Joe Walsh. So I said to him, I go, how is it, man, that whether you're playing through a Marshall or this little practice amp, you just sound so much like Joe Walsh, you know? And he goes, it's sacred, man. Don't tell anybody. And I'm like, okay. And he said, I think he was kidding, or I wouldn't be saying this now. But he goes, you see this? And he hands me an old Herco pick, like you know, we grew up playing when we were kids with the ribs on them. He goes, I play with the shoulder of the pick, where you get all that. He goes, that's what gives me a sound. And I'm like, he goes, you got to try it sometime. There's a bunch of picks up on my amps. And I go, oh man, that's your thing, man. He goes, fuck it, man, we're in the same band. And then it just made me laugh, because I go, have you always done that, Joe? He goes, yeah, man, James Gang. And and I said, you know what really cracks me up about that is just like that fact that he thinks that is a secret. You know, so many guitar players have used that ribbed part of the Herco for their sound. You know, I love that he like keeps that in his mind as a secret. It's so beautiful to me. It's so sweet. But you know, that is a sound, man. When you take one of those old gray Hercos like Jimmy Page used to use, and it's like a kerrang, man. When you scrape it on that string, instead of just going donk like a regular pick, it goes like, you know, it's like a knife edge because of that serrated. And man, it's a sound, and it's a very usable and cool sound. I do it all the time for certain things. It's really great when you're playing like a dirty lead and you want it to have some attitude. Like each note has teeth on it when you just go into that instead of just a donk, you know. And that was his big secret, you know, that he talked about. I learn things through osmosis. I do better when somebody's not trying to show me something. I learn by watching people. I learn by seeing somebody do something, and I'm like, oh fuck yeah, that's exactly how you do that. You know, probably not as good at, like, if somebody sits me down and tries to show me something. I like to like watch and learn. So I observed a lot of things, you know, that he would do, you know, that I was like, of course, that's how you do that. Yes. And one of those moments where I was like, of course. we were opening the set with this tune called Meadows. You remember it? It's the same riff as My Woman from Tokyo by Deep Purple. It's literally the same riff. I don't know which one came first, but it's like, it starts off with an electric 12-string going, dum blah 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 blah, right? So the first thing you hear, opening bit of the song, first song in an arena, is my pitiful ass up there playing a plugged-in electric 12-string, going dum blah blah before the band comes in, right? And when I play an electric 12-string, I like the way when you just brush the strings on a clean electric 12-string with compression and some nice treble added, you get that feathering, like somebody cracked an egg over your head, and it's got that beautiful, real sort of pleasing liquid kind of sound. And like when I play electric 12-string, I like to get that tone where it's like real jangly and sort of feathery, you know? So he's watching me at sound check, you know, practice, trying to play this intro to the song, and I'm playing it real chill. Because it's like, that's how I like that like guitar to sound, you know? And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, he goes, play it again. I'm like, I play it. He goes, man, you're playing a fucking arena. You know, don't be fucking feathering this thing. We're playing the fucking 40,000 people, and you're the first thing we see playing this riff, you know? You know, don't be like all gentle feathering, you know, like, and the obvious things like, yes, of course. Yes, you're right, Joe. Sorry, I'm an idiot. You know, he's real picky about certain things. Like, if you're too loud, he hates it. And if you're too quiet, he hates it. Like when you're playing rhythm next to him, you got to be at just the right volume. Like if he can't hear you, he gets pissed. And if you're too loud, he can't take it. So it's like, you come over, it's like, you're killing me on Rocky Mountain Way. I'm like, okay, man, I'll turn it down. And then the next night, he's like, I can't hear you. You know, he says like, I remember him saying to me one time, because I had my amps pointed at me in a wedge. And like, he goes, your guitar sound like this. And because all he was hearing was the side of the amp, you know? And then I realized, oh, duh, okay, I should point it a bit at him. So I sure enough, I turned the amp a bit, and he's like, that's better. You know, he liked it when I played Firebird. I used an old reverse Firebird, you know, and he really liked that guitar. He liked the way it sounded for his music. I like that Firebird. He would always say that. I do love the guy, man. We're supposed to do some more gigs coming up, you know, and I was very proud to be a part of that Barnstorm reunion. That was a big televised concert. He had the original Barnstorm back together, Kenny Passarelli, Joe Vitale, and him. And he had me play with him. And it was great to play rhythm in that, because it was billed as like the first time Barnstorms played together and so and so. So it was me adding supplemental guitars and Jimmy Wallace adding keyboards. But man, it was great. I think it was, what's that channel? Axis or something. It was on there, played a million times on there. And it was in Denver. We did it, I remember. And I was very proud to be a part of that, because it was, you know, it was a kind of an epic moment for Joe Walsh fans at Barnstorm reunion, you know.
Did that tour go to Cleveland?
Yeah, man, it was really cool to see, like, yeah, you know, a lot of old friends came out to that, and, you know, they couldn't believe that their old buddy was up there playing with Walsh, you know, yeah. We did that tour. We were opening for Tom Petty, playing all these, you know, big stadiums, arenas and types gigs, you know, and we were doing like an opening slot. We go on stage at 7:30, play for 45 minutes. We were on the bus to the next gig at about 9 o'clock. You know, I remember we had a band meeting to decide what night we were going to stay behind and actually watch Tom Petty play, right? But those guys were very cool. The Tom Petty guys were so cool. They would come out and hang at the catering with us and talk to us. I remember Mike Campbell was very cool. He came up to me like one of the first nights. He was like, dude, that gold top Les Paul you're playing is the sound of rock and roll. He was like really cool. And the only person we never saw from that group was Tom himself. He would never come out. He would hide somewhere and you'd never even see him until like 1 second before they walk on stage. I don't know what he was doing, but like all the other cats were very social and coming around. I got to be really good friends with like Ron Blair and all the guys that were. And I've known Steve Ferroni for a long time. I was actually the first guy to hire Steve Ferroni on a Nashville session when I was producing a record years ago. So I knew some of the cats, but they're great guys, man. Just super sweet. Ben Tench is a really sweet guy, and just good guys,
Was that Tom's last tour?
Yeah, that was the end of it.
You think that's why he was hiding off somewhere?
Yeah, I know. I heard that he was in great pain with his hip. His hip was in really bad shape, and I know he was on a fine concoction of different drugs, to sort of deal with that. But they were doing these long shows. There was like these 2 hour plus shows, and he would just sort of stand there and wouldn't really move, but I could tell he was in a lot of pain, but man, they had it made. They were on that tour, 2017, they had set up a hub in Chicago. I think it was Chicago. So they hubbed out of Chicago for every gig of the tour. So they would just get on a plane, dressed for the gig already, fly, have catering, and then just chill and then go on stage. So they were already dressed when they got to the gig. They were looking cool when they got there, and they would have catering and they would hang out with us, and good guys, man. I'd love to see Mike Campbell again. I'd love to chat it up with him. And we got talking quite a bit on that tour. You know how it is on a tour. You just sort of night after night, you just sort of get to know guys a little bit. But I mainly talked to him about records. That's what I like to talk to guys about. Like. I remember asking him, people know me as a question guy because I ask a lot of questions. I love to get a party started by sort of going around the room and sort of, asking people like provocative questions that sort of gets the room buzzing and talking. I've been doing that for a long time. People know that I do that, and it's like a thing with me, But I'm not doing it for a joke or anything. I'm just genuinely curious. I really want to know, like, human nature is the only thing that I'm interested in besides music. I'm fascinated with why humans act and do the things that they do. I'm like really fascinated with that. And I'm studying people, and I'm studying the way they act and the way they do things. And I love to study human nature, and that question thing is part of that. I was thinking about this time when I asked Mike, because as a session player, there's a drug that happens on a session that's better than any drug that you could, like a real drug that you could ever take. And man, once you get a taste of it, you want it the rest of your life. And it's like, I call it the magic overdub. When you make a nice track, right, a nice bed track that sounds cool, but it's missing a couple things, man, if you come up with, there's this thing that happens if you get lucky and you find the part and the tone or whatever it is, if you find the fucking magic overdub that just makes the track blow open and come alive. You can't always do it, but when you do it, everybody knows it, man. You start playing something and everyone's like, dude, and like jumping up and down, and you come up with a part and it just makes the track, man. Once you feel that feeling one time, you just want to do it every day. And I love that feeling, the magic overdub, man. And I asked him, I go, all those great records you guys made, I said, that feeling when you come up with like the banging part that just makes the track? He goes, oh yeah. I go, what moment do you remember the most of coming in and doing an overdub and just making, and everyone was like, Hitsville. And he was like, American Girl. He said when he came in, they had the track and he came in and started going ding 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 ding, that octave thing, and he said everybody was just like, hell yes. And that was like his that's his number one memory. I asked John Oates that same question, unrelated but still funny. John Oates is a really close friend of mine, and I asked him about that same question one time. Moment when you just came in with the fucking money overdub, and he was like, oh dude. He said, we were doing a session one time, and we had just got done for the day, and we really weren't planning on doing anything else. We were packing up, and Daryl had just gotten this new drum machine, and he was kind of goofing with it a little bit out in the live room, and he turned it on, and it just was sitting there playing a beat, and it was just going, and nobody really cared. Nobody was really trying to make a new song or anything. And he was just about to leave, and he picked up a guitar and he just plugged it in the console, and he was like, and everyone was like, okay, maybe we should stick around for a little longer. And that was right out of the horse's mouth when John told me that story. You know that feeling. It's such a great feeling, man, when you come up with a part that's just fucking money, man. And like, I'd say for every 100 times you try it, you might get one. You know, like you try to come up with the money part, you know, and you just keep fishing. But man, when you find it, that it makes the clouds part, man, and it's a good feeling.
Is it, I Can't Go For That? Is that the song?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure I had the right one.
Yeah. And I don't know why that popped in my head. I remember that's one of the things I talked with Mike about, you know. He's a good guy. He's a very down-to-earth, kind of cool guy.
Were you at Tom's last gig? Was that at the Hollywood
Man, I
Bowl?
don't know. What I do remember, we never played the Hollywood Bowl with them, but I do remember we did a good bit of that tour, and I think they went on without us, and I think that maybe would have been a bit after, but that was definitely the year. I know, 2017. You know, and it was a bit of a shock to. Yeah, it's kind of a drag, man. It's just unbelievable. I mean, people ask me about shit like that, and I do wish that I had a video camera in my head that recorded all that shit, that I could just go, how about instead of me telling you what it was like, watch this, and show them a video of what it was like to be there. You know, because I'm terrible at explaining, you know, shit after it happened. You know, I'd come home from some amazing gig, and my wife, tell me about it. I'd be like, it was fun, you know, you know. But I wish I could just play the video for them. And some of the moments that I've been privy to, some of the things that playing the guitar has let me see. Fortunately, places I've been. It's just at age 54, it just amazes me, man. I think about it, it's like, this is unbelievable. I just saw him recently. We played a gig recently together, and man, we were chatting about the old days. He's a beautiful guy. He's like a little kid. He's very curious about guitar and music. Like, he sees people doing things all the time that he doesn't know how to do, and he's not one of those guys just like, I play the way I play. He like wants to learn this stuff. He's like a little kid. And I remember like at sound checks back in those days, because I can do anything. I can play slow folk music, but I can shred, I can burn, you know, if I need to. I learned all that shit when I was a kid, you know, because I was a shredder when I was a kid. So he would hear me at sound checks. I would just goof around. I'd play some like burning shredder liquor, and he'd be like, "How are you doing that?" And I would say, "Well, it's just this." And he said, "Will you show me that?" So I used to give him like lessons after the sound checks. You know, we would go off in the corner, and I would show him like riffs to practice and things like that. And in return, he would let me ask him questions, because, you know, I just said I loved asking questions. So I would just go off in the weeds, asking him all these crazy questions about his writing process, because that's what I was really fascinated with, you know, and how he came up with the band name and playing at Woodstock and all these things I always wondered about. And he was super cool about answering all these questions. And I remember I would just show him a couple licks, and he was like super cool, man. He would just sit with me, but you know, a lot of people don't realize that CCR was the headliner of Woodstock. They were the biggest band in rock and roll at the time. After a series of #1 singles, man, God knows how many. I asked him, why did you never release the Woodstock footage? Because for many, many years it was unavailable. I think it's out now. Yeah. But I haven't seen it, but I don't know how long ago it became available, but it wasn't very long, right? And I said, man, why were you so protective about not letting that get out? And he said, because it was terrible. He said, we were terrible. He said, that whole thing was so far behind schedule we were supposed to be on at like a real reasonable sort of primetime spot. And it was so behind schedule. By the time we got on the stage, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning and everybody was asleep. He said he remembers, I remember him saying, there was this one guy out there with this pitiful red light over him, and I remember him going, "We're with you, John." And they were just played this real sleepy set, and he never thought it was very good. He said he did think they were very inspired. He never wanted anybody to see it. You know, so you say you've seen it. Is it as bad as he said it was?
No.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. So
it's freaking Creedence.
Right. You know, and he's great. You know, so he came out and sat in with us on this Jim Irsay gig recently, right? Jim hired him to come out and play like 4 or 5 of his classic tunes, right? So he gets there and he comes to the sound check and he's like, "Book, you know, we're chatting it up." And I was like, "Man, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time." And I said to him, "John, you know, because that band, the house band on that Jim Irsay gig is pretty big. There's me, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Mike Wanchick, all playing guitars, and then there's another guy, Danny, playing acoustic in the back. There's a lot of guitars." So I said to him, first thing I said, "John, dude, I realize there's way too many guitar players up here. I mean, your music is like just real simple. Anybody you want to leave the stage, totally cool, man. We're all pros here." And he goes, "No, I'd like to have the memory of playing with all you guys." You know, I thought that was super cool how he said that, you know. I was like, "You got it, buddy." You know, so we launched into all the classics. And he was very comfortable because Kenny Aronoff was playing. That's his drummer. You know, he's been playing with him for many years. We had a great time that night. We closed the show with all those big hits, you know, and man, people love those songs.
He wrote like all those in 4 years.
Dude, he told me, when I asked him about his creative process, I'll never forget this story. He said, our first single was Susie Q, a cover of Ronnie Hawkins' tune, and he said, I thought that was psychedelic music. He said, I appreciated the fact that it was a hit, but that to me was psychedelic music, and I did not want to be known for that. That's not where my heart was. He said, I had to come up with something that would set the direction, tone for the next upcoming things, and I wanted to write some tunes that would really set us in that Mark Twain direction. So he said in one night, he came home to his apartment and stared at the wall, and in the same night he wrote Green River and Born on the Bayou in one night. I asked him about the band name. You know, where did you come up with that? It's a great name, you know, Creedence Clearwater Revival. He said, well, it wasn't really a great band name because in the early days they threw all our records in the religious bin because they all thought they didn't know it was a rock and roll band. And I said, well, how did you come up with it? And he said, well, I always thought that Creedence was a really cool name for a person. Apparently, like in the Deep South, he had seen that used as a first name for some people, and he thought it was a cool name, so he was always looking for something to go with it, and he couldn't find anything for years. And then one day he was watching an Olympia beer commercial and it said, brewed with clear water, you know, and he was like, Creedence Clearwater. That's it. That's where he got it. And that was right out of the horse's mouth, man. He told me that himself, and I was like, damn, man. That was cool to be able to sit with him and, you know, and talk about all that stuff, you know. And I showed him some licks, you know, and he was cool. I don't know if he ever went and practiced them, but I showed them to him. Well, we were opening for Tina Turner all across Europe. We played all these giant venues because she was huge. She was like the Beatles at that time in Europe. So we were just this lowly opening act, you know, but she was playing these humongous, like Wembley and humongous stage. I remember doing one gig. I don't remember where it was, somewhere in Germany, but it was like an outdoor festival, and you couldn't see the end of the people. You know how when you look at an ocean, it just sort of fades off in the blue, and you don't know how far it goes? That's how it was with people. It was crazy. So we would just get up and do our bit, and we'd play for an hour or something, and all the classics, you know, and then she would put on her big, giant Vegas review, and it was awesome. I mean, what a performer, you know, she is, you know. That was a cool experience, you know, for a guy that was 31 years old, you know, just going all over Germany and just seeing all these crazy German street fairs and all the shit that I saw. he had some sort of pedal board that was off stage that his tech would run. His tech at the time, back in those days, was a guy named Jerry Sabatino. I remember him playing like that black 68 Les Paul that he was really well known for playing, and he always tuned it down a whole step, right? So like Bad Moon Rising is always in the key of D, right? But he don't play like that. He tunes that guitar down a whole step, and he plays a big old power chord E, and then a big old hillbilly B7, like, you know. And if you do it, he goes, look, I'll show you. And he starts playing, and you're like, oh fuck, well there's the record, you know, because I always just thought it was D, A, G, D, right? But that's not how he does it. He plays a big old E chord, big old hillbilly B7, and an A chord, and it's sure enough, man, when you do that, it sounds just like it, you know. And on that gig, when I was playing with him, all he ever did was he played all the leads, all the solos. And all they ever did was just stand there and just go, play rhythm, you know, just like jabbing on a seventh chord, you know, because all the songs, you know, that's all I did all night, you know. And he played all the leads. It was great. We did all the hits, man. You know, it was cool. That was a lot of fun. And but I was thinking about that. That was fucking 23 years ago. Wow. Crazy. I was probably one of the last people to watch it, which is really weird because I consider myself to be one of the biggest Beatles fans that ever walked on this earth. I've been obsessed with them since I was a baby. You know, all I ever knew about music up until I was 13 years old was Beatles. My family, my sister, that's all I ever heard was Beatles. All my first records were all Beatles, you know. So that was, to me, I just thought it was just Beatles was all you get, you know, all you had, all you needed. And then it was like, and then I started discovering other music. But for a guy that loves the Beatles that much, I don't know why I was like, sort of, like, wasn't really in a hurry to see it. And then I kept hearing all these people talking about it, right? And they would say things like, you know, well, it's a hard watch, you know, or it's kind of painful to watch, you know. And then I finally, I wait till I get sick to watch something like that. Yeah, I think I got a cold or something, and then I had downtime, you know, it wasn't working, and I had all this time to kill. So I sat right here and turned it on and watched it over the course of a couple of days, and just by myself. And boy, you know, parts of it are very painful to watch, you know. It's like, it made me realize so many things about them, you know, stuff that I probably had already sort of suspected, you know. The thing about the Beatles that I think, among the many, many things that made them great, was their unbelievable ability to edit themselves. They would sit for hours and slog through just the most horrible sounding crap, fishing, you know, trying shit. But boy, they knew when they found the good bits. And they knew, the Stones were good about that too. They knew how to sort of showcase and edit a bunch of shit to turn it into something, right? And man, to me, that's the most important part, man. They were amazing songwriters. And they were experimenting and trying shit, fucking around, unsuccessfully, until they hit the magic thing, and they knew when they found it. And man, you gotta give them credit for that, man. The way, when you hear the finished records, as opposed to the rough sounding crap that they're playing on that stuff when they're just slogging it out, it's unbelievable to think that it came that far, isn't it? Like with the amazing overdubs and stuff they put on, and how far those records came from what they started with, and how much it changed over the course of them writing the tunes. And you know, a lot of people have said whoever they thought was their favorite Beatle changed a lot after they saw that movie, right? Like preceding seeing that movie, if somebody just randomly asked me who's your favorite Beatle, I would always say George. You know, I just thought he was the coolest. And I think they're all extremely cool, believe me. But they were just kids when they made that shit. You gotta remember, they weren't even 30 years old. And they were doing that colossal, groundbreaking shit. You know, George was being a little brat. John could be a little brat, you know. it seemed to me from watching that, you know, I think I'm not alone in the sense that Ringo was trying to be cool, and Paul was really the one just trying to get it together. He just wanted everybody to get along. He was just trying to make it cool, and man, just getting opposition at every turn from the others, man, except Ringo. And man, that had to be frustrating for him, man. You know, he was just trying to do his thing, and it seemed like he really liked it when they would join in and collaborate. But they were fighting him at every turn, man, you know, and it made me respect him a lot more, just thinking, you know, John and George could be a bit of a brats at time, you know, and they were both immensely talented, but, you know, not great team players, it seemed, you know, right? But man, watching that gave me a lot more respect for Paul. And the main takeaway I took away from that painful 8 hours is what a call to arms it was when they had to go up on that roof and do that thing, because none of them were prepared and they were sweating it. And boy, when they got up there, man, all those years of all that entertainment experience that they had came right out, man. And they turned that shit into something magic. And it was so cool to see how much it elevated when they actually had the fire under their ass and they had to pull it out. Boy. And then you go, well, that's the fucking Beatles. That's why they were the greatest live band in history, because they could sing like that and they could play like that live. 3 amazing singers all in the same band. That would have been the best lead singer of any band on their own. All in the same band. And, you know, 3 legendary songwriters all in the same band. You know, I mean, it's a deadly mix, man. And boy, when they got up there on that roof and they had something to prove, man, the electricity of that, astounding, man. Jesus, and what Billy Preston added. Billy was like the secret sauce that I think made them up a level. You know, they were trying to play as good as he was playing, you know, because he came in, he was a ringer, you know, and they were like, we can't let this guy outplay us, you know, so we got to bring it. And man, what an awesome show that was. And the way that shit sounds up on that roof doesn't seem like it's very doctored up either. I think that's kind of how it sounded. I mean, I know it was mic'd with some really nice mics and shit, running down the stairs to the studio, but man, this shit sounds pretty good. And the vocals are really good. No, I think you could see them being reminded of that feeling of why we were a great band when they got up there. And like, you know, because, you know, you've been on gigs like that where you were in a band that really cooked at one time, but you haven't played in a long time. And then for some reason you might do a reunion gig or something, and you get up on stage and you're like, oh man, I hope we play good. And then you start playing and all of a sudden you're like, fuck, we were a pretty good band, right? You know they were feeling that. And they were like having fun with it because it was a cool idea, you know, as silly as it was. The part of that movie that just made me cry, I cry at everything now because ever since I had kids, but I was in tears, man, when they were interviewing the people on the street during that. Lord, I just want to cry thinking about it right now. Just like all those sweet people just like running from their jobs, going from one place to another. It's like, you know who's up there playing? Oh, it's the Beatles, right? Oh, I really like the Beatles. They're good lads. And all those sweet people. And like the polarizing opinions. Some people loved them. Some people, I don't really like them very much, you know. And all the girls, you know, the way they were so appreciative that they were up there doing that. All those totally English people were so cool, man. And I just love that part where they had the mic down the street and they were interviewing the people, older people, younger people, just getting their opinions about what do you think about all this shit that's going on. So cool, man. Wasn't it?
I loved it.
Oh,
I loved everything.
Yeah.
Their volume when they're recording was really low, and the way everyone played was really a nice one. They had the overhead mic picking up some vocals as they were rehearsing or whatever, and you could hear the vocals pretty clearly. Yeah. Even though there are guitar amps going and a drummer.
Yeah. No, but got to keep in mind, those guys were singers first. And, you know, any singer, I don't care who they are. If they can't hear themselves singing, they ain't happy. And the Beatles were not only were they singers, but some of the best singers that ever lived. So you know that was their main concern, was the singing. So that's why they played so soft, because they were singers. And man, you know, that's what you always see. But like you watch those 70s Eagles concerts, you know, the original band, they're playing very soft. They're singers. You know, the only people that want to play really loud are people that don't sing, right? That's it. So, I mean, the Beatles were all about singing, boy, and unrelated, but slightly related, was like, you know, those guitars that they played, those acoustics that they used on their Hard Day's Night era, you know, those Gibson J160Es with a pickup in them. They kind of look like country and westerns, but they're kind of a little more sloped, and they have those weird P90 looking pickups at the end of the fingerboard. Have you ever played one of those? They are the worst sounding guitars. They're about a third the volume of like a regular acoustic guitar. They sound like they're stuffed full of socks. They have about as much acoustic volume as like a 335. Seriously. Like if you're sitting there, a 335 would be about the same about output. It amazes me if that's really what they were using. How did those acoustic guitars sound so good on like Hard Day's Night? And somebody pointed out to me, maybe the reason they liked those guitars is because they were so quiet, because they were singers. You know, you don't want a big ass booming fucking, you know, Martin to sing over when you're trying to fucking, you know, maybe that's why they like those guitars, because they could sing right over them like nothing. Those J160Es are comically quiet. Every one of them. I've played hundreds of them. I've never seen one that sounded any louder than a 335. Wow. Unplugged. So I think maybe that's why they like those. But then you would think, well, how the fuck did they get those unbelievable acoustic sounds on those records? That couldn't have been a J160E. There's no way. Like you hear like on the 63, 64 era Beatles, how good those acoustics sound on those records. That cannot be a J160E. It can't. I know they used Martins later, you know, like Blackbird and all that shit was all Martin, but those, like I Should Have Known Better and all those, that's flogging acoustics, man. They sound rich and fat. Can't be that guitar. It just can't. That's a mystery that somebody out there knows the answer to. I can't imagine that was that guitar. I can't believe it. If you're ever in a music store and you see one of those, pick it up. You won't believe it. Yeah. Well, they used them, so there must have been something to them. But I don't know, man. I thought the only reason they used them because there was a pickup, because they could plug it in. Yeah. But you see, like in the Hard Day's Night movie, in the black and white stage scene where they're handing those guitars around, Ringo hands them one. It's that guitar. Wow. But they're like that acoustic right there is 3 times louder, and that's just a run-of-the-mill old K. Like those things are like there's nothing to them. It's weird. I never could understand that.
The SG that Irsay has.
Yeah.
Have you played that?
Oh yeah. What
are your opinions of that?
It needs a setup and everything, but it's a nice guitar. Sounds good. Like that was actually the first guitar I ever played on one of those gigs. The first time I ever jammed with Irsay at any of his like little get-togethers was totally impromptu, and I picked that guitar off the wall and plugged it into a little Tweed Deluxe, and you guys know any songs? I don't know, what do you know? And me and Kenny Wayne Shepherd, it's like, I don't know, I'll sing a blues song and see Mike Mills standing there, and like, see? Okay. You know how it is. Blues is like the number 101 thing that you pick up if nobody knows the song. I think I know blues. So I played that guitar, and it sounded great, but it's like, it has all those guitars need some setup. You know, they haven't been played in a long time, you know. But it's a nice guitar, man. I have one just like it. It's great. I'm so funny about guitars. I am obsessive. Like you said, you were obsessive about some things. If a guitar isn't 100% set up right and in tune, I can't tell what it is. So that could be one of the best guitars in the world, but until I get some frets in it and get it the way I want it, I can't tell. Right? I do remember it sounding good, and then I noticed that some SGs seem to have a lot more mid-range than others. That's what I look for. That one had the bite. So it sounded good. But, man, all these old guitars are so different. Every 335 is totally different than the next one. Every SG, every one of them is a whole nother mystery.